What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate. Today, it has been decided. The first ever 12-team college football playoff field has been graced upon our very eyeballs. It is right down below me. And man, there is a lot to talk about. We're going to review some conference championship games. We're going to talk about the 12-team field, give some initial reactions to what we just saw. And in the end, no predictions today. Those will come in later videos. But we're going to talk about why I think the playoff field shaped out the way that it did. Strap in. This is going to be a fun video with a lot to unpack. And I really appreciate you clicking on this video to tune in. Thank you so much for supporting the channel in any way that you already do. But if you're new to the channel and you want to help see what I have to say about these individual games as we get farther down the line in the college football playoff, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. And you especially should do so if you're as big of a college football nerd as I am, which if you're watching this video, that tells me all that I need to know. But you can help support the channel in any other way. You can like, you can comment, you can share. I'd be very appreciative if, again, just kicking back, relaxing, watching this video, that already means a lot to me. And if you want to go give me a follow on any social medias at Tailgate829, come 2025, we're going to be posting a lot more about my life outside of YouTube and all the other things I do within the sports media realm. But let's dive in. Let's talk about this 12-team field. So let's first talk about the way conference championship games ended up shaping out. And let's kind of go in order here. It was a Boise State thumping of UNLV on Friday night, and that helped Boise State earn a first-round bye in the college football playoff. Now, at the time, we didn't know if it was going to be the 3 or the 4, but Ashton Jeanty had himself another monster game, 32 carries, 209 yards, 1 touchdown. I think he should win the Heisman Trophy, and Boise State in the field as a first-round bye. Let's go chronologically from the games that we saw there on Saturday, and again, another boat race. Arizona State, welcome to the college football playoff field. We'll tell you how they got that last first-round bye here in just a minute. But Cam Skattebo, man, they were without Jordan Tyson. He's going to be out the rest of the season. He had some sort of surgery on his arm, shoulder. You saw him in the sling on the sideline. It at first was an undisclosed injury until we saw him in the sling, and you kind of figured, okay, shoulder, elbow, arm, whatever the case may be. They didn't need him because Cam Skattebo ran all over this Cyclone defense. 16 carries, 170 yards, 2 touchdowns, and this Fork defense, well, it forced 3 turnovers, and I mean forced. It wasn't Iowa State giving the football away. Arizona State forced those turnovers. They got hat on ball, forcing 2 fumbles. They forced Becht into throwing a pass that he did not want to throw, ended up picking it off. Arizona State dominated that game. Congratulations. One of the greatest turnaround stories in college football this season. You move on past that game, and Georgia and Texas was the next game up. First ever overtime game in the SEC Championship's long history. And okay, I say long history, but it's the first ever overtime game in SEC Championship game history. And it was the same story as the first meeting. Quinn Ewers came out flat, and Texas could get nothing going. Quinn Ewers, I say looked flat, but he threw for 258 yards, or 358 yards, my apologies. Texas was moving the football up and down the field, but I say similar story because Quinn Ewers, 2 interceptions in that game, and the rushing attack, Quintravion Wisner had himself 51 rushing yards, but minus 27 yards for sacks. So you include sack yardage in this rushing total. Texas only ran for 1.1 yards per carry. Don't know what it is about this dog defense. Quintravion Wisner had been running really, really well in the previous 2 games against Kentucky and Texas A&M for whatever reason. When the Georgia defense is on the opposite side, they couldn't do much. And this Georgia defense stepped up big time, forced 3 Texas turnovers. Granted, the Texas defense played really well as well, forcing the Georgia to only allowing Georgia for 277 yards. Carson Beck came in that game. Came out in that game. Gunnar Stockton came in. Overall, just didn't really look that great, but Georgia found a way to do it on the backs of their defense, and that's how Georgia ended up with the first-round bye. I don't think a lot of people were surprised that Oregon won the Big Ten championship game, but I think a lot of people are going to be surprised to find out it was a 45-37 game. Yeah, defense, very, very hard to come by, but the defensive plays that did matter, Oregon forced 2 Penn State turnovers, both of them with picks, including the one in the last 2 minutes at the end of the game. Drew Aller taking a shot down the field, and it was intercepted by an Oregon defensive back who, my apologies, name is escaping my mind, Nico Reed. There you go. He was the one that ended up sealing this game. Oregon ran out the rest of the clock, and in their first season as a member of the Big Ten, they are conference champions. Again, defense very, very hard to come by. Oregon's offense was clicking, 469 yards, but so was Penn State's, 523 yards, including almost 300 yards on the ground. Oregon's rush defense was not that great yesterday in Indianapolis, but Oregon, the better offense prevailed. The team with more weapons prevailed. And again, defensively, it was those turnovers that helped the Ducks secure an undefeated season and the #1 overall seed. So, okay, how did Boise State move up into the 3rd spot? How did Arizona State move up into the 4th spot? Well, that was all because of Clemson and SMU. Clemson was dominating the Mustangs for a long time until SMU made this a game late. I think they were down 31-14. They scored, got to stop, scored, got to stop, and then in there, they got to stop, had to punt it away, got it back, went down the field, scored with 18 seconds left, and then what happened next was absolute magic. Just some great plays called by Clemson down the stretch, a pass to Antonio, it was a great kickoff return. They got it all the way out to the Clemson 45. Adam Randall on the kickoff return. That set up a pass complete to Antonio Williams for 17 yards. That got just on the outside of Nolan Hauser's field goal range. His career long before this was 51 yards. This one officially from 55 or 56, and it just had enough distance. A magical end for Clemson. They are back on top of the ACC, and they are in the college football playoff. Now, due to where they were ranked at 17th, that was going to lead Boise State and Arizona State, who is ranked above Clemson, to go ahead and get that final spot for the Arizona State Sun Devils to get that final first round bye. But let's talk about how the field play out. The committee showed Oregon at 1 and Georgia at 2, and none of us should be surprised by that at all. And with the way Clemson and SMU played out, Boise State was at 3 and Arizona State was at 4. So that's the way that all played out. All 4 conference champs, top 4 conference champs get a first round bye, and that is what happens here. So then we come to the 5 and 6 seeds, and I think a lot of people thought, okay, well, let's see who loses these conference championship games, and then they might end up falling below Notre Dame. Well, that's actually not what happened. The only team that moved relative to Notre Dame was Georgia, jumping Notre Dame because they won the SEC championship. Texas stayed above them. Penn State stayed above them. Texas gets that 5, which with Clemson getting into the field as that final team in as the ACC champ. That sets up a Texas and Clemson matchup, and I'll preview the matchups very, very slightly here in just a little bit. And Penn State got that 6. Penn State was right there, man. I think a lot of people, including myself, thought Oregon was pretty fairly going to handle this Penn State team, and that's not what happened at all. Penn State came to play. 500 yards of total offense against that Duck defense is really, really good. I think Penn State just proved right there they can go win a national championship. And a lot of people are going to look at the Penn State resume and say, well, you lost your one game to where you had an opportunity to beat a ranked team. Penn State just showed right there that they can compete. Couple interceptions, you clean that up. Who knows? We might see a very different result in Penn State walking out of Indianapolis with a Big Ten championship, but they're going to get that 6 seed, deservedly so, and the Notre Dame gets that 7. We knew Notre Dame was going to get a home first-round playoff game. It was just up to, okay, is anyone going to fall below Notre Dame? A lot of people thought Notre Dame was locked into that 5 seed because of what Texas and Penn State, or what the 2 Big Ten and SEC conference championship losers were going to look like, were going to do, and ended up falling below Notre Dame in that regard. And if it was going to be Georgia losing that game, then Notre Dame would at very least be 1 spot higher than they are right now. But Notre Dame gets the 7, and the committee showed us last week it values Ohio State's strength of schedule and strength of record over Tennessee. It values their resume more by ranking the Buckeyes over the Volunteers last week. And that stayed pat here. So Ohio State, Tennessee was the first fully confirmed, well, okay, besides Texas and Clemson, the fully first confirmed at-large matchup right there between those 2 teams. And I think it's going to be a fascinating matchup. Again, we'll talk about it more later. Indiana at 10 was no surprise. And then here came the decision that was going to get people upset no matter what. And obviously, you see that SMU made it in. Now, whether you have already written it in the comment section, Alabama should have been in. They had a tougher strength of schedule. You The committee was going to end up de-incentivizing something. And what would you rather the committee de-incentivize? Would you rather them de-incentivize strength of schedule, which they did against Bama? To a point, my point being, yes, Bama has some really good wins. They beat the SEC champion in the Georgia Bulldogs. I think that's going to get a lot of people upset. How is a team that beat Georgia out of the college football playoff? But Bama also had some very, very questionable losses. He had that loss on the road to Vanderbilt, a little bit more understandable than the loss on the road to Oklahoma, because at least Bama made a game of that Vandy game. But Bama did nothing in their well, okay, they did everything in their power to win that Vandy game. It seemed like they did nothing in their power to win that Oklahoma game, and I think it was the two losses against Vandy and Oklahoma that kept Alabama out. So, would you rather the committee de-incentivize strength of schedule or de-incentivize the conference championship? Because to me, de-incentivizing the conference championship is a whole lot worse. I know what people are going to sit out there and say. People are going to sit out there and say, well, you should just schedule Akron, Kennesaw State, and Kent State, and those should be the three games that you play in non-conference because it clearly doesn't matter. You scheduling these big non-conference opponents if it doesn't get you anywhere in the college football playoff. Alabama scheduled Wisconsin. They were able to go on the road in Camp Randall. They got that win. They got some really good wins in SEC play, but you also have to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. That is my argument that I've been telling some people out there before I sat down and recorded this video. You have to beat the teams that you were supposed to beat. Alabama was supposed to beat Vandy, and Alabama was supposed to beat Oklahoma. And if they won even one of those two games, we are having a massively different conversation about the final team getting into the college football playoff. Between SMU and between the Alabama, SMU lost on a game-winning field goal in their conference championship game. And sure, while their strength of schedule, strength of record probably is not as good as what Alabama is going to post, they made their conference championship game. They made that game competitive. They did everything in their power to win that game, and it was still Clemson that came out on the winning end. Alabama has a ton of, well, not a ton, but two very, very questionable losses and even more questionable performances throughout the year in games that they should have won handedly, that they kind of struggled in. And I believe, if you want my personal opinion, and this is where I may lose some of you, I think the committee got this thing right. Now, I think they got it right from the criteria that we have in its entirety. Do I think this thing is perfect? No, it's never going to be perfect, and maybe that's a talking point for a different video, because there are some tweaks now, seeing all the flaws and things with this sort of college football playoff field and with the way that we have the ability to rank teams and the top four champs getting first round bye, I definitely would change a lot of that. But you take a look at the bracket here that's going to play out. I know there are some people that are going to say, oh, Penn State's going to boat race SMU. Oh, Notre Dame is going to absolutely thump the Indiana Hoosiers, which very well could be true. I could see that happening. But every team in this field is for a reason. And I guarantee you there are going to be people out there saying, well, whoever wins Texas and Clemson, they're going to go thump the Arizona State the Sun Devils, right? Arizona State's hot, man. That defense looked really good. Cam Scadaboo is a dog, and we're going to have a ton of good games. I think every team in this field is deserved to be here. 1 through 4 because they won their conference, Clemson included in that. Texas and Penn State because they lost their conference championship game by hairs and whiskers. Notre Dame because of what they've done all season long. Ohio State because of what they've done all season long and the wins that they've had. Lost on the road to Oregon by a single point. They beat Penn State on the road. They beat Indiana. So they're 2-1 against teams that are in the college football playoff field. Tennessee, for the way that they have played all year, they have a win over the Alabama Crimson Tide. Close-ish loss to Georgia, even though Georgia pulled away, and some other solid wins. Indiana, they did what they needed to do. The one team that a lot of people were like, okay, we find out a lot about Indiana here when they went on the road to play in Columbus. Well, they ended up getting housed. And Indiana soundly beat everybody outside of Michigan that was elsewise on their schedule. And again, you can have the whole strength of record, strength of schedule thing, and you can talk about that with even Texas. Texas's SEC schedule was not that difficult. Their best two wins, they lost to Georgia twice, but their best two wins are probably Texas A&M and Vanderbilt. Am I getting that right? I mean, Texas has got a really, really interesting strength of schedule, but again, you lose to Georgia twice, once in overtime, once at home. Penn State, same thing. You lost to Ohio State, probably one of the true teams that they have played this year in a lot of people's eyes, at home, and you lost that game even though you started out with a 10-0 lead. Oregon, you're looking at it right there. Oregon. Now, Oregon is interesting because their strength of schedule is not that great, but they've played Ohio State, Penn State, Boise State. They've played some good teams, so I don't understand why their strength of schedule is the way that it is. But I'm not going to sit here and argue that anymore. This is the field we got. I think for the most part, the College Football Playoff Committee got this thing right. Yeah, maybe I would switch a couple rankings and things, but actually, now that I'm thinking about it, honestly, I don't know if I would have changed anything. Because the big thing to me is anyone going to fall behind Ohio State? Or is anyone going to fall behind Notre Dame? More importantly, Notre Dame. Is anyone going to drop down below Notre Dame after losing their conference championship? How far was Arizona State going to rise? Well, after Clemson beat SMU, we didn't really have to worry about that too much because we knew that they were going to be locked in to that first round bye. I think this is going to be a fascinating playoff field. Ohio State and Tennessee. Look, man, I know what a lot of Buckeye faithful and a lot of college football fans have said about Ohio State, and that this is a team that just looks flawed. But every team is flawed this year, and a team that just doesn't look like they can win a national championship. Oh, that is where a lot of you out there are mistaken. And I think a lot of people, not only with Ohio State, but with Notre Dame, with Penn State, with Arizona State, maybe even with Clemson, maybe even with Tennessee as well. I think a lot of people are going to come out here and say, oh, there's only 2 or 3 teams that can go win the national championship. Yeah, Oregon can. Yeah, Georgia can. I think Texas can. I think Penn State showed against Oregon they can. Ohio State, that arguably is the most talented roster in the country. If they put everything together, they can run through this entire thing. I think if Tennessee plays up to their potential, they can. Everyone is going to sleep on Notre Dame. I think they can win the national championship. And honestly, I think everyone in this field, apart from maybe Indiana, I don't really see them stringing together anything to win a national title. And maybe SMU just because of the road they have to travel. But for the most part, I think everyone in this field can win a national title. And because of how we've seen college football play out this year, there are spurts and there are moments where a lot of these top teams just look flat and just look awful on one side or the other or both. Ohio State looked that way against Michigan. Tennessee looked that way against Florida. Texas has looked that way against Georgia twice. Clemson looked like that at home against the Louisville team that was struggling. Arizona State has looked that way before they got hot. Boise State has looked that way in games this year that they ended up winning. SMU, Penn State, Indiana, everyone in this field has had games where they've just looked flat. They've just looked off. We know Georgia has. We know Notre Dame has. They have the worst loss out of anyone in this field with Northern Illinois, that loss being on the resume, but they won every other game past that. I could sit here and talk about this college football playoff field forever because I think it's very fascinating when you dive on into the nuances and see what could change and things like that. I'll just say this right now. For later iterations of a 12-team college football playoff, I just think you need to seed the field 1 through 4. If you win your conference championship, I think you should get in, much like college basketball, but we see 15 and 14 teams out of the SWAC make the NCAA tournament all the freaking time, and they don't ever get a top 4 seed. They don't ever get rewarded for that. You should be rewarded for winning your conference championship by being placed in the college football playoff field. I think now, seeing the way this has played out, rewarding a conference champion with a top 4 seed, that might be a little bit far. Exactly what they did with Clemson. Clemson had 3 losses. They've been rewarded for winning their conference championship, and they ended up being that final team in the field, much like a team out of the SWAC or any other of those very, very small mid-major conferences, of those one-bid conferences in college basketball would look like. I think you have to adapt the college basketball model in that, look, every 1 seed that makes the NCAA tournament doesn't always win their conference. I think college football has to adapt to that as well. But again, first year, not really going to complain about it too much with the criteria and the way that we had the ability to rank teams and what the playoff committee had shown us all season long. I think they got it right. I think they actually got it 100% right. I've kind of talked myself into that sitting here and recording this video. I think they got this thing 100% right. I know there are going to be a lot of people out there that are going to disagree with me, so feel free. Disagree with me down in the comment section below. Guys, I cannot wait to get into this college football playoff field. I can't wait to predict these games. I can't wait to predict this field because I truly believe this field is wide open. I know a couple of you out there may be thinking, well, only a couple teams can win the national championship. I think over half this field can go take a shot at winning a national title. We'll preview and predict these games as we go along. And if you want to hear me talk more about the college football playoff, please leave that comment down below. I promise we're going to break into all these games, and I got a lot of packing to do because I got to drive home here. But enjoy the rest of your Sunday. If you are an NFL fan, go watch some more football. Hey, remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. Stay tuned on the channel. We'll talk more college football soon. Goodbye.